Happy to have our man Anthony Slater of The Athletic with us here on ESPN 1320. Ant-Man just sharing with us. He tapped out midway through the second week in Las Vegas, along with most of us. We tuned into the Kings game because we're contractually obligated to. And, man, even some of those got a little rocky, Anthony. We weren't even there.
Hey, at least the Kings gave you two spectacular summer league games at Golden One Center. With Keith Murray playing star. Those crowds were good, by the way. I don't know. Were you guys out there those nights?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, this city is always loved. I think this city has a strong ownership of California Classic. Were you around for the original?
Yeah, I've been to every one. Originally, the plan was it was going to literally be the four California teams, right? Lakers, Clippers, Warriors, Kings, and it was going to go from Staples to Golden One to Chase and kind of rotate. The Clippers never even got in it. Now they've obviously added different teams. Chase Center did it 1 year, I believe. It was last year.
Yeah, it was last year. It was a disaster.
Disaster is how was that? Wrong.
It was come on, man.
How was that?
They closed it one day.
Well, I mean, you got to remember you're emerging from COVID at that point. There were still those like uneasy, like how close are people allowed to be? Is media even allowed to be? I would agree that I think it is the perfect event for Golden One Center. And should probably, I live closer to Golden One, so I'd prefer it to be there. But, yeah, I don't know. I mean, Chase was okay, I'd say.
I think they would do well in L.A.
You think, well, the Clippers aren't in it. I was going to say, you think Bomber World will get it, but
they might get in just for that.
Yeah, maybe he wants to debut it there. But like you said, they got to get in it. It's turned interesting. How about this year, them getting the team with the number 1 and number 2 picks? Obviously, Wembanyama didn't play, but.
I was happy to see Brandon Miller. I wished he had played a little bit better here, but I was thrilled with it. I didn't really think Victor Wembanyama was going to play here, even though the NBA was like, "Oh, it's fine, whatever." Hey, ain't no chance in hell he's playing in Sacramento. He ain't ruining our Las Vegas primetime. That first game in Vegas, as you can attest to, that first game in Vegas has become a very, very big deal.
Yeah, and I like how the league always does it, where they set up the number 1 pick to play the 2 pick, then the number 1 pick to play the number 3 pick, and they basically, I don't want to say like force these teams to make these guys play, but they definitely strong arm them. Like, look, you can sit them, but like they're playing these prime matchups. Like, set them up for that.
We tried to figure this out maybe a week or two ago, but you would probably have a better idea. The summer league is like a convention. Like they had NBA Con this year. Like that's essentially what it is in Vegas now. When did that start? Was it, we speculated it might have been like, it was always like they were doing some stuff in Vegas and it was cool or whatever, but the spectacle that it is now, we kind of thought it might have been that Lonzo Ball draft when it was Lonzo, Tatum, Fox was there as well. Probably had another guy or two, but that seemed like the first time it like went to another level.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a slow build somewhat, but I would say a few key things have happened over the last decade that has exploded. You mentioned that, just like the Stars playing, LA fans coming, but also I used to cover the Thunder. The Thunder used to not go to Vegas. They would go to Orlando. I don't know if you guys remember. There was like an Orlando summer league that
in their practice facility.
Yeah, that 10 teams would go to, which, by the way, I used to love because there was no fans. It was all just executives and like important people in the league in this quiet building. And you could just go around and talk to whoever. It was so weird, though, because there was no fans. I remember when you're watching Mitch McGary. It was actually the day that Kevin Durant left to go to the Warriors. But Mitch McGary, who's a very passionate player, I guess you would say, he was getting N1s and like, swearing and yelling and it was just so awkward in this empty gym. And you could just see the people courtside like writing notes, like, not sure we like that from him. And it was I remember at one point I actually went on the broadcast for NBA TV because, again, it was the day that Durant left for the Warriors, and I was with Vince Carter and Rick Kamla, and I was doing the NBA TV broadcast. So I have very fond memories of Orlando, but that has been nixed. And after that was nixed, then every team now goes to Vegas, where it didn't used to be that way. And I think that has allowed it to, as you mentioned, become a summit. The GMs have their meeting. The refs have their meeting. The Athletic, we had our big summit in Las Vegas where everybody came. So it is kind of the annual end of year like meetup for basically the whole league.
I don't think I connected these dots before. Are you the Brian Windhurst to Kevin Durant?
They used to call me Trader Slater in Oklahoma City.
Oh man,
that is cold.
And when I left, you guys remember the Players Tribune article that KD put out,
My
like
next
my next
chapter.
chapter? Yeah. So with that pose, Endless Cancer photoshopped my because like 3 weeks later I left to go cover the Warriors. He photoshopped my face onto Durant with a my next chapter, and he tweeted the picture out and said, "I'm gonna burn your news."
Oh my god.
Yeah, it got wild around there.
Did they call you a cupcake when you went back to OKC?
So a month after KD left, they signed Westbrook to an extension, which was a huge deal because they didn't know at the time if Russell Westbrook might leave too, and he commits to staying. And they have a huge press conference with like a blue carpet down at the arena, and it was the last thing I covered for the Oklahoman, who I worked for at the time before I left. And I walked in and I got booed. Like, they booed. It was, I mean, and by the way, it was all like friendly. It was almost joking with me. It was not joking with Kevin Durant. But I love the fans in Oklahoma City.
I remember that day. That was a really big day. Like they were like, Westbrook is goated here forever. He stayed. That was
There's a reason they were so passionate about him.
Yeah, that was a big deal.
What was that like? We always hear about the LeBron Cleveland game. What was that one like?
Venomous. That was the craziest arena I've ever been in. The signs were questionable. Obviously, not like people in cupcakes and stuff like that. But it was just sad in a lot of ways because I had covered what he meant to that city for a decade before that, and when he's going and touring the tornado wreckage and he's getting inducted into the state Hall of Fame, not the sports Hall of Fame, like literally the state of Oklahoma inducted him into their Hall of Fame. And he just was so much there. And, you look, spurned lovers are always going to act like, much more passionately than people who didn't care that much. So I guess you kind of understood, but I remember talking to like locals at the time, or even employees that knew Kevin personally and liked him, and it's just there was a kind of like a deep sadness on what it had revolved into.
Speaking of spurned lovers.
Oh my God!
Oh, you guys got it.
Man, they got him. Come on, Ennis.
They got him.
There it is.
That's uncalled for.
Ennis Cantor calls out Trader Anthony Slater. Jeez.
There you go.
So uncalled for.
I think things worked out for our man.
Absolutely, man. I didn't even talk about this all the time, but this is an interesting travel down memory lane. I mean, it's one of the great players of all time leaving, so that's going to always elicit emotion and all this other stuff. But did it from the outside looking in? You were involved in it, but it seemed like they were almost blindsided. Well, LeBron leaving completely. There was like a year of, he might leave, or rumors, and even Stephen A. broke the news like a month before the decision, like he's going to Miami. It seemed like the Durant leaving OKC, I remember nobody knew. Like that came out of nowhere.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's so much involved here, but you mentioned Stephen A. I remember early in the season, Stephen A. said, hey, KD's going to the Lakers. That was his big thing. I'm hearing Lakers. And then I asked Kevin at practice, and he had like Stephen A. Smith doesn't know me. He doesn't know anyone in my camp. Like part of the reason that there was a blind side is Kevin was it's not like he said, hey, I'm staying for sure, but he was like against like, hey, it's not over. Like I might stay here. And then you got to remember how that year ended. In a lot of ways, it was very encouraging the way they played in the playoffs. They beat that 67-win Spurs team. They had the 73-win Warriors on the ropes, 3-1. Game 6, we can all remember the Clay game. So there was a belief internally, like not only did they proved to him, like, look, we have a ready-made title contender, the way Steven Adams had emerged at that time, but also they had Al Horford committed to come in the early days of July, and it was going to be a starting lineup at the time because they had just traded for Oladipo. They traded Ibaka for Oladipo. It was going to be Westbrook, a very good Victor Oladipo, you got to remember, and Durant at the 3, Al Horford at the 4, and Steven Adams at the 5. And those were like all in their prime. And like they were like, look, we have the best team in the league ready for you to come back to. And then, the team that they had, I mean, obviously him going to the 73-win team, everybody remembers that. But Yeah, I had gone to Austin the week before. He was releasing his KD shoes, like KD 9s, I think they were. And I remember then there was a Thunder representative there that was kind of guiding him around. And that was the first time. It was probably like June 28th or something that I was starting to get a sense that they were feeling like he actually might leave. And then he did the Hamptons. You guys remember the Hamptons?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Obnoxious
So
as hell.
The Hamptons 5. Shut the hell
Yeah.
up, Golden State.
But I mean, he held like 6 meetings in the Hamptons. Like that was when free agency was very drama filled. When people were reporting on like
Why
the
do I
specifics of meetings.
was Phil Jackson there? Was he with like New York or something at the time?
No, he wouldn't take meetings with the Lakers or Knicks.
Okay.
And I think Phil Jackson got criticized as like clearly you can't, lure free agents. You can't even get in the Hamptons house. That was, and Steve Ballmer did get in the Hamptons house, and it was that was quite a time.
That's funny. Wasn't Katie was pretty rooted in Oklahoma? Doesn't he have like is it a steakhouse or a restaurant?
He did. I went there. It used to be. It was great. They had to change the name. The Yelp reviews went insane the month after he left.
Yeah.
They had to like change the name because nobody, it was right next to Toby Keith's bar and grill because he's huge there, and it was KD's and really good food. But it had to be like it basically got canceled. To use a popular term.
Center court with Kevin Durant.
Well, I can't wait for Monty McNair's Steakhouse to open here.
Well, and that's a great transition there. You're listening to D-Lo and KC on KIFM West Sacramento 98.5 FM KRXQ HD2 Sacramento ESPN 1320. Always live on the free Odyssey app with Anthony Slater of The Athletic, who spoke to future steakhouse owner Monty McNair, I guess, according to Kenny Caraway. Lots to take away from your conversation. You and Sam Amick had a conversation with Monty McNair. One of the things that stood out the most to us, Anthony, and I don't know that we've gotten the opportunity to talk to you about this individual yet. It was very, very clear in your guys' conversation and Monty McNair's words. This organization as a whole is very high on Sasha.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's much higher than they were necessarily when they got the draft rights. Obviously, there was a conversation, hey, this intriguing international talent. He kind of fits the way we, want to play. And he's getting better into his mid-20s. And they made the pretty obvious draft day move to take on some money, $1.75 million, and give away, I think it was the 49th pick to Cleveland, which became Isaiah Mobley, and get Vezenkov's draft rights. Kind of a dart throw at that time, you would consider it. But then he really has blossomed, exploded the last couple of years overseas, which includes he was the EuroLeague MVP this season. And not only that, as that's going on, the Kings hire Mike Brown, they trade for Domantas Sabonis, they get Jay Triano to run the offense, and they now have this like flowing back cut system with catch and shoot guys. And it's like, oh, that actually happens to be exactly the type of offense that would lure Sasha Vezenkov over, to the NBA. And they play so well that I think if this is a 32-win Kings team, the Kings of the past, I just think he's staying overseas. I mean, he almost stayed overseas anyway. So I think it all kind of came together. And yeah, I mean, you mentioned it, but in the story, he's mentioning like, hey, a lot of people never knew the Hito Turkoglu's, the Pejas, but Bogdanoviches before they get here. But then suddenly 20 games into a season, you're like, oh, like this is a pretty major factor on a contender.
And what stuck out to me when he was talking about the whole process of getting Sasha was how after he lost the championship game, the EuroLeague championship game, there was concern that he might stay and, have some unfinished business. And it just really stood out to me. I talked about it yesterday too, but how Monty wasn't like, oh man, I'm kind of worried. Let's cross our fingers. He's like, he might stay. We got to up the offer. Like we can't lose him. Like he needs to come here. And that just kind of showed the sense of urgency and maybe what they thought about what he could be in this Kings team with this Kings team that, we have to have him here. Like we cannot chance him going back home. If it takes more money, making more money, but we got to have him here.
Yeah, like Mike Brown went over there for like 2 or 3 days. Like he didn't take like some Greece vacation that like, yeah, while I'm out here vacation and I'm gonna go stop over and say hello to a guy. Maybe I'll coach. It was like that's a full court press, right? If the head coach flies to Greece to watch a game and went out to dinner with him to get to know him, and it wasn't just him. Jay Triano went, I believe, over the All-Star break. So they had like he was a heavy part of their plans. And again, it's weird because it's different in, like, let's say you're going after Kyle Kuzma. Okay, you're like bidding against other teams. You're trying to pitch yourself to them. They were kind of either pitching themselves or he was staying over. Like, it was a different type of free agency pitch, but it did kind of feel like to them, especially the way he went out. You mentioned it. It was a heartbreaking loss. That, somebody hit the game winner. They lose by 1. He had a great game, but he was kind of bad down the stretch. And I think it was like a pull of like, for his legacy stateside or there that he wanted to stay. But yeah, I mean, the money was enough, and it's somewhat team friendly too. It's a 3-year, I believe, with about $20 million deal, and the third year is a team option. So if this doesn't work, they can get out of it before Keegan Murray's money, kicks in. And they are a front office that thinks that way, right? They think deep into the future.
Yeah, and that was something that came across really clear. You mentioned Kyle Kuzma's name there. You mentioned him in the article as well. How close do you think they were with guys like Kyle Kuzma and even, perhaps the most untradeable player in the entire league, OG Anunoby? Like, how close do you think they were with those guys?
Well, I mean, you got to trade the whole cupboard to get OG Anunoby, it seems.
I guess so.
Toronto's just never going to make a trade, even though they're in every trade. They clearly had conversations, but I think on the OG front, like every other, rival team in the league have come like, no, we're not meeting that price. We're probably not even meeting like 70% of that price. As far as Kuzma, like there were, internal discussions obviously about it. And what is it? That's a him or Barnes type scenario. Obviously they pivoted back towards Barnes. Kuzma, now retrospectively reading it, to me it seems like he kind of wants to be a 1A or 1B on a team, and the fact that he went back to Washington and it's going to be him and Jordan Poole, and they're probably going to win 23 games and he's going to score 22 a night. Like, that's not what was available in Sacramento. It was more, hey, come be the 4th banana, 5th banana, but you could maybe compete for a title. So I think there was just some differences in that type of realm. And I think, I mean, they not only pivot back to Barnes, they obviously lock in Sabonis long term, but he mentioned, and I think maybe the most revealing stuff he gave to us in that long interview was like, they still have all their picks. They still have very tradable contracts. And like, if there's a big swing to be made, probably we're talking more towards the trade deadline, especially if he thinks they're disappointing this year, which is a possibility. It seems like he's going to be aggressive. And part of what they did this summer was making sure they kept their cupboard full for that.
Yeah. There's been a lot of discussion about the Kings offseason and what they did or didn't do, who they did or did not go get. What do you think about the offseason? Do you see the value in what they did as far as bringing these guys back, or were you looking for them to maybe do a little bit more to bolster that roster?
Yeah, I mean, I could hear the argument for like, a Kuzma just being an upgrade over Barnes, especially if it's a few extra million. I could also hear that if anybody wanted to say that it was kind of an overpay on Sabonis, I'd probably generally agree. Like, if you took him to next summer, I don't think he's necessarily getting that much on the open market. But then again, you are going through a lame duck year with him contract wise, where what are all the questions going to be if he goes through a 10-game slump? As the deadline comes, does he want to be here long term? Do you want to, grapple with your best player over, $8 million per year next summer? Probably not, especially considering what they gave up to get him, right? Tyrese Haliburton. So overall, I understand wanting to lock him in and using some of your cap space for that. I do like the Vezenkov value. Chris Duarte is an underrated move. We'll see if it works out or not, but he was intriguing as a rookie before he got hurt. And then Barnes is unspectacular. That is the place that I think if they actually truly want to be a West Finals, NBA Finals team, I either think they need to find an upgrade there via trade, or Keegan Murray just needs to explode into that upgrade, which is a possibility. So I wouldn't give it like an A, but I mean, it's a B minus with, especially after talking to Monty, much more of an understanding that like the flexibility matters to them. The fact that they now know they can, because they got off Rashawn Holmes, they can sign Monk next summer if they need to. They can still make the big trade. I think it's generally pretty smart GMing, I'd say.
You mentioned obviously there's a scenario where things could be disappointing, and I think Monty used the word pivot in your conversation. There's an easy way to pivot. Do you think his measurement for what is disappointing has changed after this last season that they had?
Yeah. They need to, I would say, firmly be in the 3, 4, 5 seed mix, like deep, as we get towards midseason. And look, I mean, we all know pivot times in the NBA are twice. They're what we just went through, right? The draft, free agency, and then towards the deadline is when teams decide, like, what are they? And Monty I'm sure will give it till January. He's not the type of rash decision maker that they're going to be 10-14 through 24 games and suddenly December. I mean, while I'm sure we'll all go on the radio and podcasts and articles and panic, I don't think he's going to panic quickly. But by the time we get towards midseason, the deadline, if they are lingering in the play-in range, like play-in feels disappointing for them now, right? Where last year play-in was the goal in a lot of ways at this time of year. That's no longer the goal. It's not only get into the first round, but legitimately again feel like you can win a first round series, should win a first round series. So as long as they're on that track, I think they'll feel okay. But when you judge it month by month, week by week, and as we get towards February, maybe a pivot is needed.
I give it an A- off season for Monty McNair.
I think a lot too. I think looking at the contracts, like the Kyle Kuzma thing, like, you want an upgrade for Harrison Barnes, like okay, but then when you look at what Kyle Kuzma did, I think your analysis of Kyle Kuzma's thinking was probably spot on. He gets the opportunity to average 20 points per game with Jordan Poole. He gets that. I don't think he would have gotten that level of money here, even though the Kings could have afforded it. I don't know that he would have gotten it here. In retrospect, it all lines up and makes
Grant's
sense to me.
Contract, like
Jeremy Grant got a mammoth deal.
Or did he? I'm going to plug your website, The Athletic. There's a great article about the salary cap on there that we're going to talk about in a few minutes, where we look at we have to stop looking at like those numbers on contracts and start looking at the percentages of the cap and how much that's changed over the years and how much it's going to continue to change. It's crazy.
Yeah, no, and that is true. And that's why, Fox's deal a couple years ago looked like, an albatross on their books. Now it's like, it's team friendly, especially when you look percentage of the cap.
Well, wait till that Jaylen Brown deal drops. Like that's going to be the most analyzed contract like in recent NBA memory.
Well, I think it gets to $70 million at the end of it.
Yeah. But at the end of it, that percentage of the cap is going to be significantly lower than it is today.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this new TV deal coming in is going to explode things. So,
and he deserves it. It's not crazy, but
right.
Steph Curry's deal, when that next contract that he signs.
Oh man!
Well, I remember the last Steph Curry deal was the first one that was like he's going to be getting $50 million a year. That's insane. Like he was the first guy to get to 50. But like you said,
just on principle, regardless of what Steph wants to do, he needs to sign one more deal just to like. Can he get to like 90? Can he get to like 90 million for a single season? Can he make more money in 1 year than Michael Jordan made in his career?
Oh man.
Because someone's going to do it. So it might as well be the first one. Steph might as well be the first one.
What's Shohei Ohtani going to get a year? How about that?
Oh, my God.
I already say he get about 75.
He's going to get
75 a year.
He's at the point where he's getting NFL ownership money. like, here's your money per year, and we're just going to give you an NFL team. You can have the Commanders.
He getting that Messi money. That's what he getting.
Goodness gracious.
He getting that Messi money. $75 million a year for Shohei, and I'd give it to him.
No, it's hard to argue. My boy's bad. So is Anthony Slater, man. Great to catch up with you, brother. Thanks for making some time for us. We greatly appreciate you.
All right, fellas.